Jesus was like, don't mess around with sacrifices anymore. It's getting too politically dicey. I'll be the sacrifice and y'all just focus on your faith formation. Hi, I'm Nat. I'm a theologian, and today I am going to do some kind of meditation on Holy Week. I often read people's meditations on Holy Week, but today you're going to hear mine. And I don't know how in-depth it's going to be. We'll see. I haven't really mapped out anything to say. But I think that meditation can come in a lot of forms, and I don't tend to meditate best by writing, and I do tend to meditate best while I'm doing something else. Hence, today you are going to observe me talk about Holy Week as I work on this Victorian dollhouse that I'm building. Oh, also, today I'm wearing my Jesus Christ Superstar shirt in honor of the day. It's got a quote from Judas on the back. It's my favorite musical. I watch it almost every Easter, and I will say it contributed not insignificantly to me attending graduate school. Anyway, I'm talking about Holy Week today because it is Good Friday. I had initially planned to film this video yesterday on Maundy Thursday because when I was growing up, that was my favorite day in Holy Week. I think mostly because I really like saying the word Maundy. Knife safety. So you store the blade of your X-Acto knife upside down. So your cat doesn't slice your food open. While I wait for my hot glue gun to heat up, I will actually talk about a few things. So I think it's fitting that I am working on this house at the time that I am. I got it for Christmas, and I am now building it around Easter time. Not on purpose, just the way that it worked out, and I think that that's like beautifully symbolic of the church. I was talking to one of the ministers, well, the minister and the intern minister at the congregation that I work for, and she said that she views Jesus more as a representation of the revitalization of the early church rather than as anything particularly supernatural. The congregation I work for is Unitarian Universalist, which I really liked and I think makes sense because I have always been the sort of person to be like, well, Jesus taught in parables, so let's read the Gospels as parables. And I think that the inclusion of these stories makes more sense when you keep in mind that Jesus is not just the person Jesus, he is also who the authors of these books and letters were using to represent the church itself. In my last video, it's still not heated up. In my last video, I was talking about the fig tree in Matthew chapter 8, and I was talking about how Jesus was really arguing with the rabbis over the way that worship happened. And this story takes place immediately before Holy Week. So I was thinking about that again because that story, besides taking place right before Holy Week, also contains the, as one of my theology classes called it, the ruckus at the temple, the cleansing of the temple in layman's terms. And I actually had a Facebook friend, I don't know if you're watching this video, but hello if you are, who a few years ago was sort of, I think, reconnecting with her Jewish faith, and she was kind of upset that Jesus got angry and turned over the tables in the temple of the money lenders and those who were selling pigeons or doves for sacrifice, because that's what was done in the temple. Like, that's just definitively what happened in the sort of this outer area of the temple, and it has, like, that's where you get the sacrifices or where you give the sacrifices. And I was like, yeah, hey, that is kind of weird. And I've been thinking about it since then. So, as I am wont to do, I went back into the Greek to read that passage because I was like, maybe it's a translation thing? This is like still not hot, is it? Oh, the outlet isn't on, hold on. Okay, now it'll start heating up. So I went back into the Greek and I was like, is this a translation thing? No, not really. I translated it pretty much the same way that the NRSV did. But I think it, again, goes back to this idea of things were being told in parables. I do really fit, I think, within this new Unitarian Universalist community that I found myself in, because I take the Bible very seriously, but I don't take it maybe quite as seriously as some like essentialists do. And it really is just there like as a way to teach us lessons, right? All this to say, I was doing some research and I learned that the money changers were there to change shekels for Roman currency. And these shekels were Tyrian shekels, which were from Tyre, and were the shekels were the only currency that the temple would accept. And this is because they had a higher percentage of actual silver than the other currencies being used at the time. Perhaps Jesus, with his emphasis on the structure of worship and the church not needing to be, I'm not like good at hot glue, I just do hot glue. Meow? Where are you? Oh, hi. Anyway, these shekels I learned were actually like getting the temple into trouble with the Romans, because Rome was like, you can't take money out of Italy anymore, and Italian Jews were like, well, we're still going to do it because we're traveling to Jerusalem for Passover or other festivals. And we need money for the temple. So there was, at this time, like while all this was going on, also quite a political crackdown happening on the temple. And it's not really mentioned in the Bible. It's just one of those pieces of like historical happenings that's going on. Because it's all well and good to understand the events as they're going down, but if you don't know what's happening like around the events or why, they don't do much good. This goes here. Okay, so I have this like theory, and if you are a more learned scholar of the political and economic goings on of the biblical era, please don't be mean to me. So my theory is that smoking. The reason that Jesus got so mad at the money changers was actually more of... Okay, I had to finish that before this totally blew up on me. My theory is that the reason Jesus actually got so mad at the money changers in the temple was more to do with anger at the temple officials disregarding the trouble that they were getting the Jewish people into by refusing to switch to a new currency. After the temple was destroyed in 70, about 40 years after this took place, the Romans actually took away the temple tax and made Jews pay this to the state instead. So I wonder if perhaps Jesus's anger had more to do with the fact that the temple authorities were holding on so tightly to something that was spelling out their own doom, and eventually they were just holding on to something that was going to be taken away from them, and so soon they wouldn't get that thing at all. And I mean, holding on to things that are going to be taken away, that's the Easter story in a nutshell, right? We love a Paschal narrative. And I wonder if the, equating this, there is one way to tithe properly. If you are going to give the temple money, it has to be in the form of a Tyrian shekel. I wonder if there was conflation of this idea that there's one way to tithe properly and there's one way to worship properly. And Jesus was arguing against, no, there's not one way to worship properly, but also against, there's not one way to tithe properly, as long as you are giving to the church in some manner that befits you. This can be tied back to, I don't have my Bible on me, but was it Mary was anointing Jesus with oils and Judas was upset that she was wasting this valuable precious oil on Jesus when she could have saved it for a better occasion or turned it in for money to give to the temple. And Jesus was like, let her do her thing. She's right. So that's a connection that I made. That's kind of how meditation goes, right? To go back to my earlier point, meditation takes you where you need to go. Right now, where I need to go is figuring out where to put these pieces on the house. Sometimes you just need to look in a new spot. To let you in on a little secret, the reason that I am feeling okay about this house being sort of lackadaisical and a little crooked is because I've decided that the owner and original builder of the house was not very good at building houses. And also his wife died tragically partway through building. She fell down the stairs. I guess the last thing that I'll say is that I really like the end of Luke with the road to Emmaus, because disciples are walking with Jesus and he's talking to them and he's giving them advice, and they don't recognize who he is until he reveals himself at the end of the road. And I really like this story in conjunction with thinking of Jesus as more of a metaphorical representation of the church, because it shows that when the church is revitalized, you may not recognize it, but it is the same. It has all the same scars, stigmata, as before, but it has changed in a way where you may not recognize it until it is proved to you. And I think that that's just a really cool philosophical point. Yeah. I approached my meditation on Holy Week in this way, thinking about, what were the reasons that these things happened and stuff like that, rather than actually, you'll notice that I did not touch on the crucifixion or the resurrection at all. I was focusing more on sort of the themes around it. This is because I went to a Jesuit university for my master's degree, and we focused a lot on St. Ignatius, as you do when you are a Jesuit. And one of Ignatius's prayer techniques is you go over the story. He uses the example of the Nativity, but I think it works for any stories. You place yourself in that moment and walk it through, and that will help you connect with the story in a way that you hadn't been able to before. I wrote my thesis on Augustine, and what Augustine did with his metaphor of original sin was very similar. So I think it just resonates with me. And yeah, that is the step of the Ignatian prayer examen that I was using for today's meditation.